Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. I'll be conducting our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. For those who were with us earlier in the evening for the launch of SpaceX's Starlink 11-3 mission from Vandenberg Space Force Base, welcome back. To those just joining for your first launch of the day with us, welcome in. Hope you've had a wonderful Saturday or Sunday, depending on where you are in the world, and we're glad that you decided to stop on by for this next Falcon 9 launch from the other side of the country. On deck tonight, this is the second bite at the apple for SpaceX in launching a quartet of satellites on behalf of their customer Astranis, based in San Francisco, California. These 4 satellites will be launched to a geosynchronous transfer orbit after they depart from the pad here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. You're taking a live look right now at Space Launch Complex 40, where that Falcon 9 standing tall. Different Falcon 9 booster, though, from the last time we talked about this mission. We'll come back to that throughout the course of our coverage. As we're getting things going here this evening on this live stream, want to thank the more than 1,200 of you who are joining with us live. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. This being the holiday period, our photographers Michael Kane and Adam Bernstein are off this evening, but our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images are very much with us. You're taking a live look at their camera perspective over on the Cape side of things. Back here at KC, we're also joined by our friend Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions. So we'll have you covered with plenty of wonderful views of this Falcon 9 rocket, if it is able to leave the pad this go around, and hopefully we'll have a successful launch on behalf of, once again, San Francisco-based communications company Astranis. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is, of course, running the technical operations of the broadcast tonight. Also want to thank our moderators in the live chat for helping us out. Callisti Lee back with us tonight, and Mark Otto joining us this evening as well. Says, been working long hours, missed you guys. Well, we missed you too, Mark. Glad you could be here with us on this broadcast. We thank our friends Aussie Space Girl, Astro Joe, and Astro Jen for helping us out on the last Starlink stream. These live launch opportunities, of course, are made possible by our wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So thanks to folks like Kui Mac 87, Butterfly, Alfred, The Rocket Girl, Sulfur for Lunch, Samantha Burkett, Rick Donner, and many, many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our member-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here on the Cape, including the one coming up tonight in 4K. In that spirit, want to thank or welcome in a number of new channel members, although I think some of these are some repeats from our last live stream. In fact, a number of these are. So we'll go ahead and scroll down and thank Mark Otto for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Appreciate that, Mark. To our 10 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Mark in the live chat. We hope you decide to stick around with us well into the new year and beyond. Last bit of housekeeping for now. If you have a comment or question about this operation tonight or other happenings in the realm of spaceflight, and your comment or question is appropriate to be read on the broadcast, love to bring you into the conversation. You could do so by using the YouTube Super Chat feature. Not only will you be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, but you'll be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we continue on through the count, and that is always greatly appreciated. In that regard, I want to thank RPM for years, one of our wonderful channel members, for a $5 super chat. Appreciate that, RPM. Says 2-for-1 special tonight. All launches, all the time. That last little bit was my side comment to that, but it certainly feels like it as we're closing out the calendar year of 2024. Good first launch for SpaceX earlier on in the evening from here on the East Coast time perspective. That launch, of course, lifting off from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. The final orbital launch planned for the West Coast, but back here in the Sunshine State, we have 2 more missions under the darkness of night, looking to launch around the midnight hour for this first one. Again, the Astranis from One to Many mission, which we'll be talking about throughout the course of the broadcast. Currently T-minus 49 minutes, 54 seconds and counting. We are just about 10-ish minutes away from the SpaceX launch director nominally taking the poll for the start of propellant load for this mission. SpaceX does its poll electronically, so if it feels like it's in a good posture to do so, it can take the poll a little bit earlier, but generally speaking, happens at the T-minus 38-minute mark. Once that go-ahead is given for the start of prop load, fueling on the Falcon 9 rocket will begin at T-minus 35 minutes. SpaceX will start by loading RP-1, or a rocket-grade kerosene, on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen starts flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes is when they start loading a cryogenic helium onto the Falcon 9's first stage as well. Helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same will happen on the second stage a few minutes thereafter. T-minus 23 minutes is when the second stage RP-1 tank should be full. And T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process begins. We see that manifest as the so-called big vent at around T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. This process is SpaceX thermally conditioning the feed lines prior to second stage LOX load, which will get underway around the 16-minute mark. Also note that about a minute thereafter is when we should start to see some pad level views of the rocket as well. I'm sure to bring those into the broadcast when they become available. T-minus 7 minutes is when the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines begins. That involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, and it helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence get underway. It starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, or the strong back, reclines about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes out, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage about a minute after that, at which point the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as the Falcon 9 enters startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch, T-minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if luck is on their side this time and all goes well, it will have a T0 liftoff when the flight computer gives the command for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9, and we'll see this bird finally fly to begin the Astranis from one to many mission. It's coming up in T-minus 46 minutes, 28 seconds as it stands. Now T-minus 45 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. Ahead of the planned launch of the Astranis from one to many mission back on the 21st, we actually had the opportunity to speak with Christian Kyle, a member of the Astranis team, the vice president of the company, as a matter of fact. Talked about a number of things from the Block 2 satellites that are preparing to launch, the mission ahead, and some of the things that are on the horizon for Astranis as they close out 2024 and look towards 2025. I want to go back to part of that conversation that we had, again, prior to the first launch attempt, where he talked about the transition from their first Block 1 satellite to the Block 2 variant that is preparing to fly on this mission and the difference between the two. So here is Christian Kyle, the Vice President of Astranis.
We really went from having an academic knowledge of how it might work to actually operating for 18 months on orbit, and that's a huge difference. I mean, there were, of course, people at Astranis that had done it before, people that came from Legacy Aerospace that had launched however many missions before our first one. But now everybody at Astranis has that experience. We've been on orbit for 18 months with our first satellite. We've learned a ton just about the little things, how to operate 24/7 shifts and how to make sure you know what to do when an anomaly comes up, whatever. But it's also the big things. We've all seen every piece of hardware that we intend to fly on orbit. We've seen it. We've seen it in orbit. So that's huge. I mean, all of the hardware from that first launch, everything Astranis designed continues to work perfectly on the first satellite. And so that gives you a lot of confidence going into this launch that you can make for, and you can be confident they're going to do a great job.
And that first launch that Christian was referencing was the launch of their Arcturus satellite that was a secondary payload on board the Viasat 3 Americas mission, which launched on a Falcon Heavy rocket. Now T-minus 43 minutes, 9 seconds and counting. It's been quite a year for SpaceX in regard to the number of launches they've had with their Falcon family of rockets. As we get close to the finale for 2024, let's take a look back on where we stand on the year so far in this bar graph form. This includes the launch that we just had from Vandenberg Space Force Base earlier in the evening. The 132 number includes both of the Falcon Heavy launches that SpaceX happened to launch during the year, as well as the currently 130 Falcon 9 flights that they have accomplished. With a good liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the right-hand side of your screen coming up here in the next 42 minutes and a few seconds, and one more coming up about 24 hours thereafter over on pad 39A. SpaceX will close out the year with 134 total Falcon flights, 10 shy of the total of 144 they set out the year with as a goal, which would have given them an average of 12 launches per month over the course of the year. Of course, SpaceX had to pause flight a few times throughout the year because of various issues, but were able to bounce back fairly quickly and get back to the pad and resume a quite blistering pace of launch as they prepare to close out 2024 and look for another exceedingly busy year, even more so than the numbers you're seeing here on your screen as they look towards 2025. In addition, of course, to the Falcon launches that we can look towards 2025 for, there will also be a number of Starship flights, beginning with Flight 7, which could be in just a few weeks from where we are right now, down in Boca Chica, in southern Texas. T-minus 40 minutes, 46 seconds and counting. As I mentioned, this Falcon 9 first stage booster that's flying is not the same one that we saw at the pad last time the Astranis from One to Many mission was poised for liftoff. I'll show you this photo side by side that Christian happened to share on X earlier today. The Falcon booster on the left is actually the one that was set to fly the first time. That's Falcon 9 first stage booster, tail number 1077 in the SpaceX fleet. It in turn was replaced with the rocket that you see on the right-hand side in this side-by-side split. That is booster B1083. It'll be launching for its 7th time now with this mission. SpaceX had a last-second pad abort after they had ignited the Merlin engines at the pad and were right revving up for a liftoff, but of course the Falcon 9 stayed put where it was at pad 40. SpaceX has not disclosed the reason for the abort nor the current status of that particular booster. Presumably it'll be able to be refurbished and flown again in the future, but given the time frame for when they wanted to launch this mission on behalf of their customer, they opted instead to swap out the booster for B1083 and proceed with the mission that we have coming up here in just about 39 minutes. Of course, it's always lovely to see the artwork that comes from a mission like this. So here's the mission patch as designed from SpaceX for this Falcon 9 rocket launch. It's getting ready to lift off here in a little less than 39 minutes from now. And within just a little more than an hour before this point in time, we had these 3 mission patches that were released from Christian and Astranis themselves. Mission patches for their 3 customers that are flying and will be benefiting from the 4 satellites that are on board this Falcon 9 rocket as we speak. If you want to head over to our website, spaceflightnow.com, we've got a preview article up on this mission that goes into a lot more detail about the 4 satellites that are getting ready to ride. Going from left to right, though, very briefly, as SpaceX will nominally be taking the poll for the start of prop load as we speak. 2 of the satellites are named New View Alpha and New View Bravo, which will support the aviation and marine customers of a company called Anuvu. Provides service over the areas of North America and the Caribbean. These 2 satellites are part of the number of satellites that they've ordered from Astranis. There are 6 more that are still yet to be added that are going to be coming down the pike in the future. In the middle, satellite named Aguila, which is the national bird of the Philippines. That satellite will be operated by Orbit's core. As you can see on the right of the mission patch there in the center of this graphic. And then on the right is Utility Sat, which is being launched on behalf of another customer of Astranis, ISP APCO Networks in Mexico. We'll talk more about Utility Sat as we come on through this broadcast, but it'll add a little bit more flexibility in the geospace than a non-government satellite is used to providing. Again, we'll talk more and hear more from Christian on that point as we continue on through the broadcast. Currently T-minus 36 minutes, 12 seconds and counting. Just a little more than a minute away from the start of fueling for this Falcon 9 rocket, assuming that all is continuing to move smoothly. SpaceX is tracking towards an on-time liftoff at the opening of this roughly 2.5-hour window today. Now T-minus 35 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. For those who may be wondering why we've had so many midnight launches or midnight launch window openings as of late, that's because of the Federal Aviation Administration here in the United States and something called the Holiday Aerospace Release Program. Just pause and note we are T-minus 34 minutes, 56 seconds and counting. Assuming all continues to go well with SpaceX fueling on the Falcon 9 rocket, should be just now getting underway. Coming back to the HARP, or the Holiday Aerospace Release Program, this is essentially a pocket of time that happens every year in order to clear as much commercial airspace for a lot of air traffic that's moving all around the country because of the holidays. It pushes the available, broadly speaking, the majority of the available launch opportunities for commercial launches to starting at midnight or later. That pocket of time this year runs from December 20th through January 3rd. Now T-minus 33 minutes, 47 seconds and counting. As we're awaiting confirmation of fueling from SpaceX, we'll be looking for some visual cues that suggest that fueling is in fact underway. You can see in this view from our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs a little bit of ground venting, a little bit of vapor there formed near the pad deck. You look just above the tree line there beneath those lights. Also looking for some signs of vapor near the base of the Falcon 9 first stage booster. If you look near where the strongback starts to taper in near the base of that structure, should start to see a little bit of vapor as the super cold liquid oxygen starts flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. Thanks to Chuck for zooming in there. You can just make out the X in SpaceX beyond the strong back, and it's a little hard to make out, but it does appear like there's definitely some vapor there in that area. So SpaceX is fueling its Falcon 9 rocket right now, which means it's locking in a T0 at the stroke of midnight Eastern time. That's 0500 UTC for our friends joining around the world. We're now T-minus 28 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. For those who may just be joining the stream now, you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the Astranis from One to Many mission, SpaceX's final flight that'll lift off from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in the calendar year of 2024. The second launch of the weekend for the company as well, having just launched the Starlink 11-3 mission from Vandenberg Space Force Base earlier on in the day over in California. Currently T-minus 27 minutes, 56 seconds and counting. At this point, SpaceX is loading cryogenic helium on board the Falcon 9's pressure vessels. I want to thank the more than 3,100 of you who are joining with us live at this point. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button. if you haven't already. It allows some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage as we continue on through the count tonight. Also want to thank James Castile for a $12 super chat. Really appreciate that, James. Who says, special Christmas school vacation greeting to my granddaughter, Jessica. Go SpaceX, go spaceflight now. Thank you for the kind words. And thank you to Mandy J. Houston for a $5 super chat. Appreciate that, Mandy. Who says, Happy New Year, Will. Happy New Year to you, Mandy. Time now T-minus 26 minutes, 24 seconds and counting. On board this Falcon 9 rocket are 4 satellites being launched for Astranis, company based in San Francisco, California. Taking a look at these satellites in an image captured by SpaceX prior to encapsulation in its Falcon 9 payload fairings. After this mission lifts off from Pad 40, they'll be launched into a geosynchronous transfer orbit with payload deployment starting at T plus 33 minutes, 45 seconds with the first one utility sat. That'll be followed by New View Bravo about a minute later. Actually, exactly a minute later. Then New View Alpha a minute after that, and Agila, Agila being deployed at T plus 36 minutes and 45 seconds to close out the deployment process. Before we go back to our conversation with Christian Kyle, do want to note where this Falcon 9 is going to be launching, the trajectory. Following a liftoff from Space Launch Complex 40 here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Falcon 9 is going to be flying essentially due east once it leaves Florida's Space Coast. Following stage separation, the first stage booster B-1083 will follow that red arc you see there on your screen and will touch down on the drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. If successful, this will mark the 91st booster landing for that particular drone ship and the 389th successful booster landing to date. B-1083 looking to make its 7th flight on this mission. SpaceX not only interested in reusing the boosters on its rocket, but the payload fairings as well. The company saves about $6 million per recovery effort. So once the fairing have splashed down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean this go round, they'll be scooped up and brought aboard a recovery vessel and then brought back into Port Canaveral, then over to Cape Canaveral, where the refurbishment process starts. SpaceX is looking to fly its fairing halves as well as its first stage boosters up to 40 times apiece. Before we go ahead and hit the start of the big vent, want to go to one more piece of tape from our conversation from Christian Kyle, Vice President at Astranis, where we talk about some of the Block 2 upgrades that have been made to the satellites that are about to launch here in now less than 23 minutes. So let's go ahead and listen again to part of our conversation. This is, once again, the Vice President of Astranis, Christian Kyle.
I'd say the core differences between what we call Block 1 Arcturus and these 4 Block 2, it's really 3 things. One, we added a larger reflector. So the first reflector was just a 1 by 1 meter square, you know, just it was parabolic, but it was just a square shape. This one opens up on orbit. So it actually has a clamshell mechanical like release mechanism that opens up on orbit, it deploys, and now it's a 2 by 1. So it's twice as big a reflector, gets us a lot more, you know, directivity basically that we can use to have more throughput on the satellites. The second big advance that we made is for the software-defined radio. So our satellites are software-defined digital, not analog. That gives you a lot of flexibility, a lot of reasons you would want that. But this time, we took our existing design, which, I don't know, fit into roughly a pizza box size, and now instead of that being one software-defined radio, it's basically two. So we have, it looks like this sort of, you know, there's like, you know, they kind of interweave and we can fit roughly the same box, two of the thing instead of one, which gives us really cool redundancy. And then the final thing that's different is that we have a gimbal on our electric propulsion thruster. So we have both electric propulsion and chemical propulsion on board. When we're doing big maneuvers, long maneuvers, like our orbit raise, which we'll do after this launch, you know, we'll get dropped off in a highly elliptical orbit. We have to get out to geo. So to do that, you either have to point your thruster with monoprop, basically pointing the entire bus around, which is not the most efficient way to do it, or you can have a gimbal on the EP thruster. So we added that. We built that in-house for this next round. So those are just three of many. I could talk about this for as long as you want, but those are the three ones that we're really excited about.
And once again, our thanks to Christian Kyle for his time in the run-up to the first launch attempt of the Astranis from one to many mission. We'll go back to our conversation in just a little bit, but we're currently T-minus 20 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. Just a few seconds away from the start of the chill sequence where they begin to condition the feed lines there at the pad. We'll start to see that manifest here at pad 40 with the so-called big vent, which is now less than 20 seconds away. There you can see the beginnings of the vent. It's a good visual indication that fueling is moving along on time and on track here. Now T minus 16 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. You see the big vent has concluded. Just a little bit tapering off there. Gearing up for second stage liquid oxygen load beginning in about 20 seconds. As we're ramping up to that, want to thank a few more folks in the live chat. Thanks to Good Cybrations. I see what you did. $5 super chat. Appreciate that. And CL Cutie, one of our channel members, with a $2 super chat. Really appreciate that, CL. Time now T minus 15 minutes, 6 seconds and counting. As we're preparing to see this Falcon 9 rocket launch coming up here in less than a quarter of an hour. I want to talk about one of these satellites in particular among the 4 that's flying. It's called Utility Sat and offers a little bit more maneuverability than is typical for a commercial or non-governmental satellite in GEO. So let's go ahead back to our conversation with Astranis Vice President Christian Kyle to explain the benefits of Utility Sat and the impact that they expect to have it make with this and potentially future flights.
UtilitySat is the world's first multi-mission GEO, intended to do multiple relocations on orbit, cover different frequency bands, different ITU regions, everything like that. And maybe surprisingly, it sort of came the opposite direction. It wasn't that we were like, okay, we need to build a UtilitySat, how do we go do it? It was that we built this software-defined satellite and we're like, wow, it actually has this other application that we didn't even intend when we first built it. So we're really using what we've built before, this digital payload, the ability to move on orbit, and applying it to a new use case, which will be multiple independent missions, whether they're, no matter where they are on Earth, no matter what band it is. I mean, we have KU, KA, and QV band on UtilitySat, which is exciting. There's a lot of stuff we hope to demonstrate with this. But to be honest, we've actually demonstrated some of it with Arcturus already. We've already demonstrated relocating on orbit. We've already demonstrated covering multiple independent missions. So this will be different, but building on that backbone that we already have. In the future, we want to have hundreds of satellites on orbit, and whether those are explicitly utility sats or whether they're more dedicated to individual customers or somewhere in between, that's all yet to be determined. I mean, we have a lot of demand for just this first prime product, which is what we're focusing on now. We have not yet announced a new utility sat launch, but in the future, I think that in reality, those things will start to blend a little bit as you have, bigger satellites with more throughput and maybe multiple customers on an individual satellite. We'll see. So there's a lot of possibility there.
And again, that was Astranis Vice President Christian Kyle talking about UtilitySat. Now T minus 12 minutes, 43 seconds and counting to the planned launch of UtilitySat along with 3 other satellites from Astranis. Now T-minus 10 minutes, 49 seconds and counting. We're getting our first pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket at pad 40 from SpaceX. One little bit of housekeeping I want to address here, the difference between our countdown clock and what you're seeing from SpaceX. Our clock is in real time. What's coming in from the SpaceX feed is on a slight delay, so as long as we have ground level views from our tracking cameras, we will be making our callouts based in real time. Do hear from SpaceX commentator Chris Gebhardt that there are no constraints to launch from the range, and the Falcon 9 rocket and spacecraft on board are both healthy. '45th Weather Squadron also forecast a 85% chance of favorable weather at liftoff today. Let's go ahead and talk about the Falcon 9 rocket, as we've got some handy graphics from SpaceX to accentuate things. We'll start from the top and go to the bottom. The payload fairings stand at 13.1 meters. And 43 feet tall, 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. There's another image of the satellites before encapsulation inside those payload fairings. Just beneath the fairings is the second stage, upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket, powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust, and it burns the same propellant mix, that being kerosene and liquid oxygen. Beneath the second stage is the inner stage. It's a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. It has deployable hypersonic grid fins, titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a dart, towards the drone ship. First stage booster on this mission, once again, is B-1083, making its 7th flight today. We'll see some views here now live from the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas, which is set to receive the first stage booster following stage separation. It's set to touch down on the drone ship about 8.5 minutes after liftoff. Now currently T-minus 7 minutes, 27 seconds and counting. At this point in the broadcast, the SpaceX team has not said or not offered any additional information as to the reason for the abort last go around with this launch attempt, or expanded on the reason that they needed to swap out the booster for the one that's getting ready to fly here tonight. Now T-minus 6 minutes, 48 seconds and counting. At this point, the engine chill down sequence is getting underway. SpaceX flows a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. As we cruise on to the final few minutes of the count, I want to first off thank the more than 9,000 of you who are joining with us live this evening. If you haven't already, certainly appreciate it if you could do us a quick favor and hit the like button, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Also want to thank some folks in the live chat for your individualized support this evening. Our thanks to Christopher Eddy for first becoming a channel member at the pad leader level, and then chipping in with a $2 super chat. Really appreciate that, Christopher. Also want to thank Howard Crumpler for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership, as well as to Beverly Knuckles for gifting 10 memberships. And then as Beverly marked 6 months as a channel member, she says she was gifting 10 memberships for the last 10 minutes of the count. Appreciate that, Beverly. And to our now newest 11 channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you all with us. Be sure to thank Howard and Beverly in the live chat if you haven't already. We hope you stick around with us. The channel membership well into the new year and beyond. Also want to thank channel member Jit for a $4.20 super chat saying, let's light this candle. And thanks to Rocket Lady Elizabeth for a $5 super chat. Who says, great coverage and commentary to Spaceflight Now. Thank you, Elizabeth, for the kind words. We're now T-minus 4 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. With the call that they are pressurizing for strong back retract. Again, this whole sequence will start with the clamp arms opening up just beneath the payload fairings, and then the transporter erector here at pad 40 will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It'll stay in that position until liftoff, at which point it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. Call it the strong back lowering sequence is now underway. See the clamp arms have just begun to open. Strong back retract sequence now underway here. As you can see, the transport erector doing a slight lean back here at the pad. I want to thank a few more folks for their support tonight. Patty Chichil, one of our channel members, with a $5 super chat, saying, double header, yeah. Thank you, Spaceflight Now. And mods, always great job. Thank you, Patty, for your ongoing support. Really appreciate that. Thanks to Gary, channel member, for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Appreciate that generosity, Gary. And to our 5 newest channel members, welcome aboard to you. Glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Gary in the live chat if you haven't already. Also, thanks to Paul Norwood for joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. Want to note, T-minus 2 minutes and 50 seconds. SpaceX commentator says the weather is green. Did you hear the call for stage 1 lock load being complete? Just waiting for the same to be true on the second stage here. Just coming up in the next less than 30 seconds. Want to quickly offer some words of thanks to Skunk for a $20 super chat. Really appreciate that. Supporting at that level. Thanks as well to Larry King for a $20 super chat as well.
As a reminder, this will be our 100
Stage 2 lock load complete.
And with that call, the Falcon 9 rocket is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Right now you're seeing the ground gas closeouts. That's the additional venting as they clear the liquid oxygen from the lines. Coming up now, just about a minute before liftoff, we'll come back to the live chat on the other side of launch. We're awaiting the SpaceX launch director to give their go for launch.
LD, go for launch.
With that good call, we are go for launch.
Olá, gente, tudo bem? Estamos aqui. Vai decolar, gente. A boca. Daqui a pouco. 19 segundos. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ligou, partiu. Vai, filha. Foguete, Falcon 9, rasgando céus da Flórida, acho que é Flórida.
And a good liftoff and beginning to the Astranis from one to many missions so far. SpaceX is currently thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage prior to its ignition. We're coming upon a few events in fairly rapid succession here. We'll have first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at about T plus 2 minutes and 28 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation and ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine. And then after the 3-minute mark will be the deployment of the payload fairings.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
All good callouts from SpaceX here as we're now a little more than 3 minutes into flight on the Astranis from one to many mission. See the hypersonic grid fence now being deployed on the Falcon 9's first stage. They'll provide some steering and control on that booster. Next milestone coming up are the deployment of the payload fairings.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And with a good deployment, you can see 2 of the 4 satellites from Astranis. Word from SpaceX that one of the fairing halves flying today is making its 22nd flight. and the recovery vessel Doug is the one on tap to scoop them up from the waters of the Atlantic Ocean as they make their splashdown. Now a little more than 4 minutes into flight, we are looking towards the next milestone here. It's coming up at T plus 6 minutes and 23 seconds. That's when the first stage entry burn will begin. First stage booster has passed its apogee, now beginning to make its descent towards the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. Still picking up in speed, though, as you can see from the telemetry data in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Falcon 9 first stage booster will hit the brakes when it starts that entry burn, which will last for about 27 seconds. At T plus 5 minutes, 52 seconds, making tracking a bit tricky. Our friend Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions has been able to acquire visual on the upper stage now. That's the glowing dot you see in the center of your screen. At T plus 6 minutes, 14 seconds and counting in real time. 6:10 on the SpaceX feed. The call for the start of entry burn. As this burn takes place, the speedometer dropping quite dramatically. Conclusion of the entry burn here. The next milestone we're looking for is the little bit different order than a Starlink launch. It's actually going to be the cutoff of the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage, or SECO-1, at T plus 7 minutes and 52 seconds. And then the landing burn will begin at T plus 8 minutes and 19 seconds. There will be 2 burns of this upper stage engine prior to the deployment of the 4 satellites for Astranis.
MVAC shutdown.
Good call from SpaceX as the landing burn is preparing to get underway.
And with stage 2 shutting down its MVAC engine, stage 1 is performing its landing burn, heading toward a short fall of gravitas.
Nominal orbit insertion. Landing leg deployed. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And
B-1083 made a successful booster landing. This is the 7th flight for this booster. With this booster landing, this was the 309th successful booster landing on a drone ship for SpaceX and the 389th booster landing to date. a little more than 9 minutes into flight. We are entering into a coast phase here. Because this is a customer mission, though, SpaceX is continuing to provide on-camera or onboard views from the Falcon 9's second stage. So we will continue our coverage through the duration of this mission and into payload deployment. The next milestones that we're going to be watching for here coming up beginning at T plus 26 minutes and 25 seconds when there will be a burn lasting just a little more than a minute. Following that burn, then the satellite deployment sequence will get underway starting with utility sat at T plus 33 minutes and 45 seconds. Still enjoying some good on-orbit views of 2 of the 4 satellites on board the Astranis from One to Many mission. Now T plus 12 minutes, 2 seconds and counting. You can see the Falcon 9's upper stage is cruising over the Atlantic Ocean on a path towards the western coast of the continent of Africa. So far been a nominal flight, and congratulations to both SpaceX and Astranis for getting off the ground this go-around after having been scuttled the first time with a last-second abort. As we're continuing to track the progress of this mission, do want to thank a few more folks for your support tonight. Want to thank Larry King for a very generous $20 super chat. Really appreciate that, Larry, who says, watched a beauty on the West Coast earlier. Happy New Year, everyone, and thank you, Spaceflight Now. Thank you for the kind words and for the support tonight, Larry. Also want to thank Chris Salit for a very generous $20 super chat. Really appreciate you supporting us at that level, Chris. Thank you so much. Channel member Paul Norwood with a $5 super chat, who says, just saw the Vandenberg launch from my front yard a couple hours ago. It's very cool. I have not myself been down to Vandenberg to see a launch, so it's on my bucket list for the future. Maybe in 2025. Make that happen. Davey Huffman with a $10 super chat saying, great broadcast and work as always. Appreciate that, Davey. We'll pass that along and share the compliments with the team. Matthew Natal with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Matthew. Says, on to the future. Ryan Snyder with a $2 super chat saying, thanks as always, Spaceflight Now. Appreciate your support of our coverage, Ryan. Elliot C with a $1 super chat. Appreciate the support, Elliot. And Mel Roberts Harold with a $5 super chat saying, here's to our newest grandson, baby Lincoln James, who came into the world just yesterday. Congratulations, Mel. That is a fabulous way to close out the year. A very wonderful little bundle of joy for a Christmas present. Speaking of deliveries, of course, the 4 satellites on board will be delivered to a geosynchronous transfer orbit coming up here in less than 30 minutes. Going back to part of our conversation with Christian Kale, the Vice President of Astranis, talked about the timeline for these satellites when it comes to their post-deployment path forward towards becoming a part of service. Let's go ahead and listen to that part of our conversation about what happens with these satellites once they are delivered from the Falcon 9 upper stage.
Yeah, so it's a standard GTO launch. I mean, it's kind of the normal. Last time we had a very different profile because we were going all the way to GEO. So that was different. We had to wait hours after the first, after the launch to actually get in contact with the thing. This one will be standard, much faster. We're going to get dropped off. I think the official schedule says 30-something minutes into the flight. And then, we hear back from it. We see how the deployments are going. We see how we're checking out all the systems. It's everything from just verifying that things have opened correctly to verifying that you're getting power the way you need to everything you need to start the orbit raise. Because then we'll do the orbit raise. That will take longer because it's all electric. So we're going to be circularizing for months. And that'll take us, we'll have to do that, of course, before we enter service. But we'll learn a lot in the first days and week after launch, which is going to be very exciting.
And thanks again to Christian for that conversation prior to the first launch attempt of the Astranis from 1 to Many mission. At T plus 17 minutes, 21 seconds and counting. A little less than 10 minutes away from the second and final upper stage burn prior to the start of the deployment of these 4 satellites. Taking a look at our live chat here, I want to thank Aussie Space Girl and Astro Joe for joining us in moderator duties in the live chat. Appreciate the both of you hopping in here again after supporting us earlier in the evening.